So we're here at Base London, and we welcome Chris Fry from the Temple Group, who's fresh from a placemaking seminar. Chris, welcome to our studio.
Thank you.
And we've got a few questions for you. So you've been talking about regeneration in a broad context during the seminar, but I wonder, how do you frame the regeneration challenges for London that we face at the moment? Is that possible? Is that easy to do?
Well, I think, yeah, it's in terms of, we know that if we build well-designed infrastructure and developments, buildings, we're already looking now at projects that will last well into the next century as well. So we need to actually be thinking in terms of the 22nd century infrastructure and buildings, and starting to look at anticipating the social, demographic, technology changes, and of course climate change, because at that stage we could well be in a different situation around the heat and the water environment and the flooding and so on.
So we're talking about investing in serious, innovative approaches that are suitable for not for this century, but for the 22nd century.
Indeed. Indeed, and I think one of the ways we've been thinking about that and looking at that in some of the projects we're involved in is as a sort of turquoise cities concept, where you're looking at sort of a mosaic across the city, all the way down through to neighbourhoods, through to individual buildings and projects and so on, and looking at really four elements, four parts that need to come together to have that kind of infrastructure and development that's fit for that era, the 22nd century. So the first of those really is water and climate resilience to respond to this climate change agenda, those blue arteries within our cities and that whole water environment. The second is then really working with environmental systems, and that brings in the whole green infrastructure debate, which is on the larger scale, parks and so on, but it's also down to the micro scale. So an example of that recently, a project in Islington where cycle storage sheds have got green roofs on them. So that's serving a number of objectives all in one go, probably attenuating the flood, looking good, and providing some ecological habitat, as well as obviously the primary purpose of the cycle shed. The third element really is innovation. I think the pace of change, the digital economy and so on, that brings information to people. We can use our infrastructure systems in different ways. We're working with one of the catapults, the Transport Systems Catapult, who are looking very much at how you can either use new physical technologies like driverless cars and pods, or actually using data in a different way. So, for example, taking the sentiment of travellers, using social media, mashing up that data, and then using that to operate transport systems in a different way, in a more sustainable way as well. So that's innovation. But fundamentally, the fourth part of it is to focus on livable places and usable infrastructure that have got to really get under the skin of the community and what their needs are currently and what they might be in the future as well. So, and it's bringing those four things back together, as I say, in this turquoise cities concept, and applying that at all scales.
So we're taking this broad concept of placemaking, and with this turquoise approach, we're breaking it down, and we're identifying very specific areas that need focus and innovation applied to them in order to deliver results that are going to be long-term solutions. And it's sounding much more of an integrated approach than many others that I've come across. And is this something that's new? Is it exclusive? Is it something that the Temple Group have developed? Or?
Sure, it's an idea we've kicked around, and we're very keen to debate it and see how that can help with these decisions and so on. Because, like you say, a number of these issues are looked at, but they can be looked at different times within the development cycle, and then some of them get forgotten about. And so we believe that this is a good way of trying to keep that whole picture in mind, keep those four elements balanced, and try and use the instruments through planning and environmental impact assessment and so on to make them happen.
And Chris, over the horizon, What are the biggest challenges that we can see, or you can see, for the environmental and sustainability agenda?
I think one of them is certainly around this climate change, resilience and adaptation. And for developments, cities like London, we have a very good understanding around flood risk, and we may see the Thames Barrier and the ownership of that issue. It may be felt to be someone else's problem, and that a new Thames Barrier or equivalent would solve that for London. And of course climate change, even the water issue is more complex than that. One recent example, the floods we saw over the winter period. More people were affected in a district of Basingstoke, Buckskin, by groundwater flooding than across the whole of the Somerset levels, which had all the media attention. And groundwater flooding is, of course, a slightly different phenomenon as well. And then you look at the heat and other storminess issues and other manifestations of that, and I think that's quite a big one, a knotty problem that we need some developments that try and explore that and look at that in more creative ways now as we move into that longer term horizon.
Excellent. And if people want to find out more about this, can you point them in a direction?
Sure. Yeah, we've got a blog that we put onto our through our website, templegroup.co.uk, and we've got a blog site that carries Turquoise Cities article. Very keen to hear comments on that, and a bunch of other case studies and so on there.
And the two case studies that you've been talking about today in the main seminar are...
So we've got the Nine Elms development down to Battersea, which is it's a huge project, real landmark project for London, central London, enabled by the extension of the Northern Line down there. So it's got that fundamental transport infrastructure in place. And the second one is a very interesting project, slightly smaller scale, still a very significant one on brownfield land in Enfield, called the Meridian Water Development. Again, it's got that blue artery all the way through the middle of it, the Lee Valley, and then the regional park, so that green infrastructure as well. So all those elements that we're talking about, I think, could be applied very well in those developments.
So two very interesting projects to look out for. Chris, thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us here in our studio. Appreciate it.
Thank you.